Joined on the line right now by the man who engineered it all for the Buffalo Bills, General Manager Brandon Beane. Brandon, that looks like the very place where you were drafting players Thursday, Friday, or not Thursday, Friday and Saturday, right? Same place?
Yep, I'm in the same seat.
That's good.
We're going to have to stop asking everybody where they're at because everybody's in the same spot all the time, just like Murph and I. Murph has never left his kitchen in a month. Brandon, you've been in your basement for 3 weeks. Jay Harris is in his living room, and I haven't left my office in a month and a half. That's going to cease to be a greeting these days. Like, where are you at? What you doing? Everybody knows what we're doing. We're not doing anything.
Brandon, you had a busy few days though, right? I want to start with this. There were really, at least detectable, there were no technical foul-ups for the Bills or anybody else in the NFL. It was a success in that regard, right?
Yeah, I think the league did a good job. I really do. This was obviously, there was a lot of questions, and then going through the mock last Monday, it took, there was one snag when it started with one team, but I think quickly people got the hang of it, and I think the league, they deserve a lot of credit. I sent a couple of them up there in email. From our standpoint, it went off with no problems, no hiccups. Again, Dan Evans and did a really, really good job. He hung around all weekend. I kept trying to tell him to go home, but he lives in the neighborhood, so it wouldn't have been a far walk for him.
Well, I got to ask you this too, and you as much as anybody, is just like us. We all watch the coverage on ESPN, the NFL Network, and ABC, and the rest. What was there about this year's draft that maybe you think, wow, we should do this again? Maybe what we found out that maybe some things work better, maybe not on your end and the football end of it, but certainly on the broadcast end. Was there anything about this you liked better than it's been in the past because of the being forced to do it a new way?
I don't know if I liked it better. I mean, it was different and you got adjusted to it, but in the end, our guys do a pretty good job in the draft room of understanding where we're at on the clock. And if there's a little bit of chatter, Steve, as our pick is approaching, usually they know kind of when we get 5-6 picks out, everybody just remain silent, be ready on your P's and Q's. Here I wouldn't have that. The mute button works well if guys are chattering. So the mute button was probably my best friend on the 3 Zooms that I had going if I needed total silence. But I don't prefer this. I missed the bonding with the guys and gals and, everybody that's in the room. That was the part. You could do the best you could like we're doing here, but there's, that personal day-to-day interaction, the high-fiving, when the board falls your way, that was kind of the down part of this. And even, last year after the draft, we sat in the draft room and just, had a few drinks and just, kind of talk through our drafts, other people's drafts, what we were excited about and things like that. And so you miss that opportunity to share that moment because the scouts, they put so much time. They're the faceless guys behind the scenes here, all fall through the spring, and they deserve recognition. And unfortunately they had to, do everything remotely.
On the line with Brandon Beane, the Bills general manager, recapping what went on over the NFL draft this past weekend. Brandon, I don't need names here, but were there occasions when, absent, the typical, 30 visits or pro day evaluations or face-to-face contact with draft prospects, were there occasions when you'd said, man, I'd like this guy. I wish I knew more about him, but I'm going to play it safe and go with this guy on our board? I mean, did you ever have to make that tough call?
Not during the draft. We went through those scenarios prior to the draft, John, just kind of going through, all right, you know what, we just don't have enough intel or we're not quite sure, we'll dock him a little bit or there's still maybe a few things medically that our docs were never able to get their hands on them. So maybe we put them, instead of the guy being in the 6th round, maybe we said, you know what, we take a shot on him as a priority free agent, but we're not going to, take a draft pick on him. We just don't, it's inconclusive, what his medical situation is. So it wasn't that many players though like that. We used the Zoom and the FaceTime and the various technology pieces that we could to really get to know everybody that was on our board.
And I guess the question is, how much do you dock if it's a medical thing that you really don't know about, and it was something like an ACL or something? I guess the question is, how catastrophic did the injury have to be before you just said, you know what, we're taking this guy from the 3rd or 4th round and we're gonna set him off we're gonna take him completely off our board? certainly there's a place where if the guy was really, really good, maybe you'd still leave him on your board, but take him down. I mean, I guess, what kind of line do you draw there? How bad does the injury have to be, and how far can a guy drop? Can he go from the first round to no way, we're not taking him?
He can if you're really worried about his long term. Like they're going, I don't know if this guy's ever going to be the same player you saw in college prior to the injury, if that came up. We really didn't have that this year. I have had that before. But there were definitely cases where, one guy with an ACL wouldn't be back till October. So that's a pup guy, not a guy you want to take quite as high. Docked him, a couple rounds. And then there was a couple with shoulders and that we said, you know what, more like dropping him a round or so, because didn't know if they'd quite be ready for camp or and again, our doctors not being able to put their hands on them and test. They're going straight off of images, which they did a great job of getting us the best information. So it went anywhere from not adjusting a guy. A couple of them we adjusted, half a round to a round, and then one or two of the ACLs more than a round.
We're live with Brandon Beane, the Bills general manager, recapping this weekend's draft. Brandon, you surprised me. I thought for sure that after sitting out Thursday, you'd be itching to do something Friday, and yet you never made a trade the entire weekend. I want to salute you. You showed me a different side of Brandon Beane.
Well, I think it wasn't necessarily a plan. I really my plan is to set the board and let it speak to me, and that's the God's honest truth. Sometimes my lack of patience, forces me to go up, and where I get aggressive and lose my patience is if there is a need and I got a guy on the board that's sitting out, and I did think it was going to be good to address the running back somewhere in this, and so that was the one player that I was most aggressively trying to get. That in the end it worked out. Nobody. And it's funny, the teams right in front of us had taken a running back or we felt didn't have a need. There was like two or three. It was more of those teams about 4, 5, 6, 7 in front of us that I said they could take one. But the problem is I was also worried that people would see maybe we need one and would trade right in front of us. So I was willing to give, a late pick even to move up 2 spots just to confirm we got Zach. But patience paid off and it worked out. But honestly, there were guys that, going into day 2 that we talked about, that we had really high grades on, that if they fell far enough, we would get aggressive, but they came off the board pretty early. And we still had guys, very similar to AJ's grade, but just pass rusher being a premium position, we went with him.
I got to ask you, all 32 teams come out of the draft and they feel like they got better because there's some great players coming out of college. How difficult was it on day 1 to see all those teams getting better and getting all these great players? Like the Dolphins picking 3 guys. I mean, you feel like you're just standing there and the whole league is passing you by. How difficult was that? And how much solace did you take when you knew you had traded your guy for Stephon Diggs?
Two-part question there. First off, Thursday was gut-wrenching, awful, whatever you want to say. It was painful to sit here and watch it. To your point, watch some of these teams with multiple first-round picks, obviously one in our division with Miami, and knowing that they're going to have really some good chances to get better. I just had to keep reminding myself that Stephon was our pick and kind of self-help counsel through the first round. But I was most happiest when the last pick was in and could look at the board. I looked at it for over an hour, and the names didn't change, just the scenarios that I was running through my head and looking back what teams selected in round 1. Okay, they took a wide receiver here, so they're probably not going to take one here. They took a pass rusher here. They're probably not going to take one here. Just trying to pick the board. But again, we were so far down, being 22 picks away, that, I honestly didn't. I thought AJ would go pretty early, day 2, and he continued to fall. And again, I think he's going to be a good fit for us.
Live with Brandon Beane. Hey, Brandon, we talked with Kirk Ferentz at Iowa Friday night. We talked with Calvin Bell, who coached AJ on the defensive line at Iowa earlier today. And they both indicated that they think there was something to the fact that AJ is an Iowa guy that maybe led you to if you had any doubts about his combine workout or maybe his background and the fact that he had dropped so far, than maybe the fact that he was from Iowa, which is known for producing NFL caliber linemen. Maybe that helped him out a little bit. Was that part of your calculation?
Yeah, I mean, that's a program, Coach Ferentz does a great job. It's run as much like a pro program as you can find. There's no frills. Again, I think those guys that come from Iowa, I think they come to Buffalo. That's not a big city atmosphere. You're not talking about, University of Miami or Southern Cal or places like that. It's farmland and corn and all those other things. And, I think, talking to AJ, coming here, he seemed pretty excited about what Buffalo is and what he knew about it and what he had heard. So that program, those guys are pros. You don't see those guys getting in trouble. Usually those guys make the most of their ability. You look at Micah Hyde, he's an Iowa guy. I believe he was a 5th-round pick by Green Bay back in the day, and look what he's turned himself into. There's a lot of stories of Iowa guys. George Kittle, look at what he's doing out in San Francisco. The tight ends that came out last year, Hawkinson and Noah Fant, those two guys had good rookie years. So there is a professionalism that I've noticed that comes out of there. Again, we didn't give him any extra star points on the board. We graded him as he is, but there is a relief knowing what type of program he's been around, and think he will assimilate well here in Buffalo.
One of the other things you did was you brought in some wide receivers, one 6'2", the other 6'3". They're both over 200 pounds. They're both known for catching and having big catch radiuses. Gabriel Davis and Isaiah Hodgins. You added some size to the wide receiver. People thought you might do that, and tell us a little bit, or whatever you can, about Gabriel Davis and Ike Hodgins.
So we'll start with Davis. Really high character young man, good leader, smart, knows ball. He played down at Central Florida, so a smaller program, but still a very good program. He played. It's weird, that offense was kind of what came from Baylor. Wide, I don't know if you saw some of the highlights, wide splits out there, not a full array of routes. That's probably the biggest question mark we had as in the scouting community, is what all routes is he going to be comfortable with, because he didn't run a variety there. You see that in certain college offenses, and doesn't mean he can't do it. Our job is to grade his skill set, and part of that we watched his combine workout, which was more routes than he's run. But in the end, he's a powerful kid. He's strong, good hands, a build-up speed guy, and he's got a vertical. When he gets up rolling, it's not that instant gear, but when he gets up to speed, he can get by the defender, and you saw him make plays downfield. I think probably the biggest thing we'll work on when he gets here, he was a guy we were going to work out, Steve, privately, just to see what route variations he would be comfortable with, out of the gate. But obviously that got canceled with the pandemic. So we're excited to get our hands on him once we can get him up here, and think he'll fit as a size guy. And then Hodgins, we had a nice grade on him, and he's a big guy. You know what? For a big guy, he drops his weight. I saw him run probably as many double moves and set guys up. Really good feel of drawing that defender in, and then whether it was a slant and go, stop and go, just some variety of routes, and best hands in the draft in my mind, in the sense of, if you just took drop rate, I think he had the best drop rate of all receivers in this draft, and I think he backs that up with his play downfield. Both these guys can go up and high point the ball, even when they're covered. So gives Josh, sometimes those big guys can, if they're going against a smaller defender, it'll give Josh a chance just to throw it up and let him go make a play.
Brandon, when last season ended, you made a point of talking about how your team needed to score more touchdowns. Both those receivers, Davis in the 4th round and Hodgins in the 6th round, found the end zone a lot, like 20, 23 times. How much of a factor was that when you looked to draft them?
Yeah, Sean made the Smurf comment last year about our guys, which was funny, but there is some truth to it. I mean, where we missed some size elements is down in the red zone, and maybe some short yardage plays where, it's hard to uncover, because speed, you can't continue to run out of the back of the end zone. So speed only helps you so much down there, and when the field condenses. So to the point I was making before, it's nice to have the basketball play, to throw it up above the rim and let a guy go up and get it. And I think we've got some vertical stretch stuff we can do with Stephon. Obviously, John Brown, Cole can work the middle of the field. Now this adds some size guys that when we get in these condensed field conditions, there were some times, Murph, where we settled for field goals last year, back to your comment about touchdowns, that maybe it would have given Brian another, type of play to call in the arsenal. We just didn't really have the fade route, as part of our repertoire.
I got one more question to ask you about. I want to hear about Zach Moss, 5'9", running back. Give us a look at what you have him graded out, obviously, and tell us about the run up to picking him and also what you think of him.
Yeah, so Zach is a Miami, Florida type kid. So you don't see a lot of guys go up from South Florida to Salt Lake City. That's not but he went there, and my understanding, I went out there and this fall and watched them practice and watched some tape out there and just kind of saw, talk to their people. They had quite a few guys come out in this draft. Matter of fact, safety was drafted right in front of Zach by the Eagles. But, one of the things they said about him was once he got adjusted to the life of Salt Lake City versus there, he really became a pro and really was a guy. He's not going to be a rah-rah type leader. He's just going to show up every day, and that's what he does. As a player, Steve, he's a pounder. He's a bruiser. He's going to hit it up in there. He can run those wide stretches, one cut, but he's also can run that gap scheme, right off guard, right off tackle. And so we look for him to be a great complement to Motor. I think Motor's shiftiness is a nice piece to have for us. But I think you still need that physicality, the role that Frank Gore played for us last year. I think he'll do this. This guy's got good hands. Utah used him more in kind of flares and screens, not downfield. But, Devin will probably be our first guy out on third down to catch the ball. But Zach can do it. He understands pass protection. He's not a throwaway in there in the pass game.
Our guest is Brandon Beane, the Bills general manager. Jake Fromm, quarterback, Georgia, 5th-round pick. Brandon, I guess it's a two-part question. What kind of a role do you see him playing in his first year, and then maybe down the line? I mean, there will be some development, I think. Will he play a different role a couple of years from now than he will this year?
I don't know. The later you go in the draft, it's about adding competition, depth and competition, and that's the goal. As you get down here, rarely are you going to find starters out of the gate down here. It's nice when you do, but first off, we didn't set out to draft a quarterback. I've said that a couple times, but you set your board and you honor your board. And when a guy's sticking out like that, quarterback is the most premium position there is in all of sports and definitely in football. And so when you got a guy with a good grade, unless you just don't have a spot for him, you take a shot on him. And so that's what this is. And here's what I know about Jake. He's very smart. He's a winner. If I was going to put one word by him, he's a winner. He came in, Eason, who ended up transferring to Washington, he came in there and beat him out and won that job. And he was a big-time recruit. And then they go win the national championship. And then Justin Fields, who will come out next year, who's now transferred to Ohio State, he held him off. I mean, this guy is he's a leader. He's a winner. He's very smart. He is a coach on the field type, very cerebral. When I was at Georgia this fall as well, they raved about this guy's work ethic, that he gets his schoolwork done. But once, he's not there to, trying to think about his career. He's thinking about ball. And they're like, he's going to play until he can't play. And this guy's probably going to be a coach someday. That's just how he's wired. And they're like, it's nothing to see him walk out of these football offices at 11, 12 at night. He loves ball. And so Murph, he'll come in here and he'll compete with Davis Webb and Barkley. But he'll have a challenge on his hands with this offseason, as far as how much he's going to be able to learn and do that. If you want to knock him, I gave you all the positives. If you want to knock him, he's not as tall, as Josh, things like that. He's not a 6'5" guy. He's, just under 6'2". And he doesn't have a howitzer arm or anything like that. He'll have to prove that he can play in these elements, but he'll be up for the task. I have no doubt. And we'll just see where it goes. It's depth and competition, Murph. That's all it is.
Give us one thing about your boy T-Bass, Tyler Bass, the kicker.
Well, he's a good old South Carolina boy. That's down near my roots, so we give him a star for that. No, you know what? I first, obviously I'd heard about him from the scouts, in December when they were kind of going through him. I never saw him play live at Georgia Southern or anything like that, but knew he was getting the invite with some of the other good kickers to the Senior Bowl. And so I stayed that whole week and watched him. And one of the days we went indoors, they were really, at South Alabama, they kind of have that covered practice facility. And so I was there and they were backing him up and kicking this thing. And he was, hitting some 60-plus yard with room to spare field goals down there. And so you saw his leg strength. Kickoffs, he was booming them out of the end zone. And so we know how important the weather and the wind and the elements are here in Buffalo to have a powerful leg. So it's one of those things, same as Barkley. This is competition, for Steven, but we were going to sign a kick. If we didn't draft this guy, there were several that we had targeted that we would try and sign after the draft to come in and compete. We already have a punter on the roster to compete with Bojo. And so it's somewhere either in the draft or after the draft, we were going to add competition. You like to go with two kickers like we had Chase McLaughlin last year, who really did a great job and got some opportunities in the league. And that's what this is. I told Tyler when we drafted him, like, you're coming in, you're going against a veteran in Steven Hauska, a proven veteran who hit some big kicks for us and has in Seattle, and nothing will be given to you. You'll have to earn it if you win the job.
Brandon, I know there was concern before Saturday about the post-draft signing of rookie free agents. How did that go? Was it as crazy as you anticipated it might be?
It went better than I thought, to be honest with you. It wasn't unknown. Joe Shane and Terrence Gray and Dan Morgan did a great job, and a gentleman by the name of Luis Guillermo, who is our analytics guy, he did a great job in our scouting app of developing something for us that allowed it's a live screen similar to some things we have at the combine when guys put in like 40 times. Guys could enter information and give me a 3-color prong where they were in the negotiation, talking to this player, confirmed with this player. So I'm seeing them change on my board, have offered $8,000 signing bonus right now. It's down to us and Cleveland, us and Tennessee, or 3 teams. Agent going to call us back. So they were able to kind of color code it where they were, and it's updating. And then we had the Zoom going. So sometimes I was checking back. And so we had Brian Gain kind of oversee what the offense was doing, and Terrence overseeing the defense, kind of the moderators. And sometimes they might have to put in the information because the player, the scout or coach was going to another player in the process. Wow. But it was really well thought out by Joe and Luis and Terrence and Dan, and they deserve all the credit. I kind of gave them this project, and they ran with it. And I was able to enjoy it. And it was the least involved I've ever been in that part. I was checking and kind of doing this and talking about, well, we can go up more on this bonus if we need. We've lost out on this player type thing. But we targeted some guys. Did we get every A target? No, but we got a good amount of the guys we were after.
So where does the roster stand right now? What's the number, and what do you have left to do?
So, these things aren't finalized. You have agreements in place, but we're right around 87. Right now we have the exemption with Christian Wade still, so we can get it to 91. And I do want to keep a couple spots. So we may sign 1, 2 more maybe over the next week or so. But some veterans, I don't know, if you guys have paid attention, you're starting to hear rumors of some veterans being released on teams where they drafted certain players. So that could happen where there's we're paying attention to that. And there may be a veteran that we say, hey, and I want to have a spot available. I would hate for our coaches we sign a free agent, they're working with them, and they've been with them for 10 days, and now I pull the rug out from under them without, wasting their time. So we'll keep a couple spots and see what shows up.
Brandon, what's next for you, your department, and the Bills in general? What should we look for next?
Yeah, exactly what I said. We're going to continue to see what's out there. Normally, Murph, we'd be inviting guys right now to that May rookie camp, trying to get the best crop of guys. And so there's going to be a lot of guys out there that did not get jobs. So that's what we're doing this week is, the guys are going to be calling with agents and seeing who didn't get signed and what opportunities, making sure there's not a guy that slipped through the cracks that we think we would like to work with or deserve a shot. That's the tough part of this for both of us is from a team standpoint, there's some guys we'd like to get a little more look at. And from the player, there's some players that you always sign 1, 2, 3 guys from those camps that kind of flash. Garrett McGinn, we got out of that camp last year who we've re-signed and was on Carolina's practice squad for a year. There's always a couple, and that's the unfortunate part of the situation we're in for these players and for teams.
One last thing from me, Brandon. May 9th is still, we're looking for the schedule to come out from the NFL. Is there anything else on the horizon that you've been told or what we can look for? Have you been told anything about what may or may not transpire in the next coming weeks? A deadline or of anything like that, or a target date that the league's looking at maybe making some decisions?
No, nothing new really on that point. I think the league has been trying to get through the draft, and I know they're having discussions back there. I do think the next big thing on the NFL calendar is what day they are going to release the schedule. The last I've heard is it's still May 9th would be the latest date. I don't know if I haven't heard that is the date, but I've heard that's the latest. So we'll see if they stick to that. I think anything can be adjusted. I think if there's some things that they think, hey, around May 9th, we're going to have some clarity here in 1 to 2 weeks, we're going to hold it. That could still happen. That wouldn't surprise me. I think the May 9th date was put out there to kind of say, hey, let's get through the draft. Give us a couple weeks after the draft to make some tweaks. They've always, in my mind, the league has always wanted to do this schedule after the draft, but teams have kind of pushed back because of trying to get planes and buses and hotels and things like that going. So in the end, I haven't heard a lot as far as what the plan is, whether there will be any kind of, everything's virtual plan right now. We would love to get these guys in late May or June, but that's still an unknown.
Hey, Brandon, thanks for this. Congratulations on a great draft weekend. Thank you.
Thanks, Brandon.
Thanks for having me, guys. Good, always good to talk to you.